Old man walks into a bank with a sack. Claims he owns it, they laugh. Then live to regret it. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. The afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the quiet streets of Rockview. A sleepy little town where nothing ever seemed to stir. That was, until the doors of Chase Bank creaked open, drawing the attention of everyone in the lobby. In walked an old man, his gait slow and heavy, his shoulders bent beneath the weight of a tattered sack slung over his shoulder. His face was obscured by the brim of a worn cap, and his clothes were a patchwork of age and wear. The few customers inside barely glanced up, accustomed to the quiet monotony of the bank. The employees behind the counters exchanged knowing smiles, dismissing the old man as just another beggar or confused wanderer. But then, something unexpected happened. The old man, his movements deliberate, paused in the center of the room. He lifted his head, revealing eyes that gleamed with something more than mere age, something unspoken, yet strong. "I am the owner of this bank," he declared, his voice calm but unwavering. For a brief moment, the air in the room hung still. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and the staff shared nervous chuckles, assuming the man was simply lost in his delusion. The security guard, a large figure with a badge that read, "Sam Bennett," took a step forward, folding his arms and speaking in a voice laced with authority. "Sir, I think you're confused. Maybe you should sit down while we call someone to help you." The old man didn't move. Instead, he shifted the heavy sack on his shoulder and let it fall to the floor with a resounding thud. The sound echoed through the bank, halting the laughter and drawing every eye to him. "I am not confused," he said again, his tone steady, with a quiet but undeniable force. "This bank belongs to me." At that moment, the room grew quieter, whispers spread, and the staff exchanged uncertain glances. The old man stood resolute, his eyes scanning the room, unshaken by the disbelief around him. Whatever was in that sack was no joke. The bank manager, John Matthews, stepped forward with a thin smile, trying to maintain his composure despite the strange tension in the air. He was a middle-aged man, always calm under pressure, but today was different. "Sir," he began with a gentle but firm tone, "do you have an account here?" The old man's face remained unreadable, his eyes piercing as they locked with Matthews. Without hesitation, he slowly tilted his head and spoke. "Accounts? I built this bank." A quiet murmur ran through the room as the staff and customers processed the words. The young tellers exchanged puzzled glances, some of them laughing nervously, unsure if this was some elaborate joke. But the old man's expression didn't waver, it was calm, unwavering, and strangely confident. Matthews, trying to suppress his growing unease, stepped forward once more. "I think you may be mistaken. Sir, this is Chase Bank. It's been here for decades." But the old man wasn't fazed. His gnarled fingers moved to the sack again, pulling it closer with a sense of purpose. With a slight smile, he unfastened it, and as the sack opened, the room fell into stunned silence. The first bundle of old, faded banknotes tumbled out onto the polished marble floor, followed by several more. They were thick stacks, wrapped in yellowed paper bands that bore the Chase Bank logo, an emblem that hadn't been used in over 50 years. The sight left everyone in shock. These weren't just old bills, they were real. And the evidence was undeniable. A hushed silence fell over the room as Matthews stepped forward. His mind racing, he bent down to touch the crumbling paper, his fingers trembling. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The old man gave a slow, knowing nod. "Proof," he said softly. "Proof that I built this bank. And it belongs to me. Long before your father even stepped foot in this place." Matthew's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at the old bills, and his breath caught in his throat. These were no mere souvenirs, they were historical artifacts, each one telling a story of a time long past. When the bank was founded, the ledger that followed confirmed it, an ancient record. Its leather cover cracked with age, but the pages still intact. And as Matthews leafed through it, his face drained of color, his disbelief slowly turning to realization. The name was unmistakable, C.K. Kirby. A gasp rippled through the onlookers. They had all heard of C.K. Kirby, the man who had founded Chase Bank over half a century ago, only to disappear from the public eye. But how could this be? C.K. Kirby was thought to be long dead, his legacy erased, his name forgotten, yet here he stood, in the flesh, holding the very proof that this was indeed his bank, stolen from him all those years ago. The bank manager could barely comprehend what was unfolding before him. But there was one thing he knew for certain now. The old man wasn't just an eccentric stranger. He was the rightful owner of this bank. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the room. The laughter, the mockery, the confusion, all of it vanished in an instant, replaced by a stunned, almost fearful silence. The truth had been laid bare. C.K. Kirby had returned to reclaim what was rightfully his. The room was thick with tension as John Matthews stood frozen, his eyes glued to the dusty ledger in his hands. He flipped through the fragile pages, each crackling softly with age, the names and signatures confirming what had seemed impossible. There, right in front of him, was the name he never thought he would see again, C.K. Kirby. His fingers trembled as he traced the letters, the weight of the discovery sinking in. This can't be right," Matthews whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible. The old man, C.K. Kirby, stood unwavering, his gaze steady as he watched Matthews. "Waiting, what happened to you? Why did you disappear?" Matthews finally managed to ask, his voice breaking through the silence that had enveloped the bank. Kirby's eyes darkened, the calm composure slipping into something far more intense. His lips tightened as he spoke, his words carrying the bitterness of years lost. "I was betrayed," Kirby muttered, his voice low but firm, "by my own business partner, John Williams. We built this bank together, brick by brick, but greed changed him. He convinced the board I was unfit to run things. Just like that, they took it from me." Matthews, still holding the crumbling ledger, could feel his heart pound in his chest. He had heard rumors, stories whispered in dark corners about betrayal, about the disappearance of the bank's original founder. But hearing it directly from the man himself, it was like listening to the ghost of the past come to life. "I fought for years," Kirby continued, his voice growing stronger, filled with the weight of every battle fought and lost. "I fought to get it back. But doors kept closing, people turned their backs on me. Until one day, I just vanished. They wanted me to disappear, to be forgotten. And for decades, I was. But not anymore. I'm back. I'm here to take back what's mine." The room had become eerily still, the weight of Kirby's words hanging heavy in the air. Matthews swallowed hard, still trying to process the magnitude of it all. If what the old man said was true, then this bank, the very foundation of it, had been built on stolen dreams. It had been constructed on lies. And now, with the truth laid bare, there was nowhere to hide. A woman in the back gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Matthews turned his gaze to the employees around him, their faces a mixture of disbelief and confusion. The security guard, Stephen, who had once stood at the ready, now stood motionless, his hand no longer hovering near his belt, but resting at his side, acknowledging that the situation had shifted beyond anything they could control. Kirby's voice broke the silence again, steady and resolute. "This place was built on my bones, on the trust I gave to a man I called a friend. And now, I'm here to take it back." The room buzzed with whispers, the gravity of the moment sinking in. No one moved, no one dared to speak. Matthews slowly stepped back, the realization settling in like a storm cloud. The truth was undeniable. The man who had once been erased from history had returned to claim what was his. Matthews' voice faltered as he finally spoke, his words breaking the quiet. "If these papers are real, then this bank, it was stolen from you." Kirby's eyes never left him, and with a final, deliberate nod, he simply said, "That's right." The room was filled with an eerie silence as Matthews continued to absorb the weight of Kirby's words. Slowly, he reached for the pile of documents, still trembling, his fingers brushing against the old, yellowed paper that seemed to hold the entire history of the bank in its fragile fibers. Each signature, each official stamp on those papers was a piece of a puzzle he never expected to see. His mind raced, trying to process what was unfolding before him. This was no longer just a crazy old man with a story. This was a man who had been wronged, a man who had built everything with his own hands, only to have it stolen from him. Matthew's heart beat faster as he realized the truth. The bank, the very building they stood in, had been built on lies, built on a betrayal so deep that even the foundations of this institution seemed to quiver with the weight of it. The silence in the room was broken by a quiet gasp from a teller in the corner. Her eyes wide with shock as she stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached for one of the faded banknotes. The other employees hesitated for a moment, exchanging looks of uncertainty, but then, one by one, they followed her lead, taking a step forward to place the documents on the counter, acknowledging the undeniable truth in front of them. Matthews stood frozen, the papers in his hands growing heavier with each passing second. He could feel the eyes of the employees, of the customers, watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. But he couldn't take his eyes off the signature on the page, the one that matched the very name displayed in the framed documents on the wall. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Kirby had built this bank, but it had been stolen from him, erased from history, and replaced with the name of a family that had no right to it. Matthews swallowed hard, his mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. What would happen now? What could they do to fix this? The weight of the decision pressed down on him, and in that moment, he realized the old man's return wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was a reckoning. Kirby wasn't asking for revenge, he was demanding what was rightfully his. The room felt heavy with the past, as if time itself was bending to reveal the truth, a truth that no one in the room had expected to be exposed. Matthews looked around, his thoughts spiraling. The bank's history, its legitimacy, everything had been built on this lie. As the air thickened with realization, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, the tension hanging thick in the air. Matthews knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, there would be no easy resolution. But there was no denying it anymore. The man before him, the man they had laughed at and dismissed, was the true owner of the bank. And now, with the evidence laid bare, it was time for the truth to take root. Matthews couldn't help but admire the quiet strength of Kirby. The old man had come here not to shout, not to demand, but to simply be heard. And now, in the face of undeniable evidence, the world was beginning to listen. The room felt as if the very walls were closing in, the weight of history pressing down on every corner. Matthews, still holding the papers, could hardly believe what he was reading. His fingers trembled as he traced the signatures, the unmistakable evidence that C.K. Kirby's name had been erased from the bank's past. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a story of an old man who had lost his fortune. This was the story of betrayal on an unimaginable scale. The rich marble floors, the polished brass plaques, the gleaming chandeliers, all of it had been built on a foundation of lies. The truth had been buried, stolen from the very person who had created it, and now it was all coming to light. Around him, the room had gone from disbelief to shock. The employees, once skeptical, now moved cautiously, stepping forward one by one, placing the documents on the counter. It was as if a silent agreement passed between them, a mutual understanding that the old man had indeed come for what was rightfully his. Kirby's claim wasn't some wild fantasy, it was undeniable, irrefutable. The whispers spread like wildfire, echoing through the room. As the truth sunk in, Matthews felt his stomach churn as he stared at the papers in his hands, the weight of them pressing down on his conscience. How had they allowed this to happen? How had they let this man's life, his legacy, be stolen without a fight? But Kirby wasn't asking for sympathy, he wasn't here for apologies. He had waited for decades, fighting a silent battle against the system that had cast him aside. He stood tall now, an embodiment of quiet resolve, the ghost of his former self living in every crevice of the room. Matthews swallowed hard, his voice caught in his throat. This is impossible, he whispered, but even he knew, deep down, that it wasn't. It was real, and it was happening. A shiver ran through the room as the full weight of the moment settled. The man they had dismissed as an old, confused wanderer was now the bearer of truth, the one who had been wronged, and the one who would reclaim what was rightfully his. The room, once filled with the hum of routine, had fallen into a silence so thick, it was suffocating. Matthews knew this moment would change everything. The way people looked at him, the way they looked at the bank, it would never be the same again. He looked up at Kirby, the man who had come to reclaim his empire. And in that moment, Matthews realized that the battle for truth had only just begun. The air in the bank was thick with tension as the realization sank in. Kirby's presence, once dismissed as a joke, had now shifted the atmosphere entirely. Matthews, holding the documents, felt the weight of history crushing him. The papers in his hand were irrefutable proof that the man standing before him, a ghost from the past, had been the true founder of this very bank. The laughter, once mocking, had evaporated into uneasy silence. The employees, one by one, placed the old notes on the counter, acknowledging the truth they could no longer deny. Matthew's voice trembled as he stammered, "This can't be. How could this happen?" But deep down, he knew it had happened, and now there was no turning back. Kirby's quiet defiance had undone decades of deception, and the truth was finally being seen, unraveled in the cold, hard light of day. The bank, the empire they had built on lies, was now his to claim. The room was still, the weight of Kirby's words hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Matthews, holding the ancient documents, was visibly shaken, his once confident demeanor crumbling. The employees, once skeptical, now stepped forward, one by one, placing the faded banknotes on the counter as a quiet act of acknowledgement. Even Stephen, the security guard, lowered his hand from his belt and gave a reluctant nod of respect. Kirby, standing tall and steady, let the silence speak for him. He had come with nothing but the truth. And for the first time in decades, the truth was being recognized. Without a word, he turned to leave, his victory clear in every measured step he took. As he walked out the door, he didn't need to look back. The battle was over. The bank was his again. The room hummed with quiet tension as Kirby's steps echoed through the bank. His victory now undeniable. Temp stood frozen, the reality of the situation sinking in as the last shred of resistance crumbled. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the monumental truth revealed inside. The employees, once uncertain, now rallied together, placing the banknotes on the counter in silent tribute to the man who had returned to reclaim what was his. Kirby's presence, steady and unyielding, was all that was needed. With a final breath, he walked toward the door. His mission complete, he didn't look back, for the victory had already been sealed, and the truth was now set free. As Kirby stepped out of the bank, the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. The employees stood in stunned silence, the truth sinking in deeper with each passing second. Kirby had come as a shadow from the past, but now, he was a force that could not be ignored. The bank that had once betrayed him, built on lies, now stood on the brink of a new chapter, one forged from justice. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the quiet streets of Rockview. Kirby didn't look back, his steps were measured. Confident, he had reclaimed what was his. And for the first time in years, the battle was over. As Kirby walked away, the silence in the bank remained thick, heavy with the weight of the truth he had just revealed. The employees, once mere spectators, now stood with new understanding, the gravity of the moment shifting their gaze. One by one, they stepped forward, placing pieces of the old man's proof on the counter, his legacy, his claim. Outside, the sun dipped beneath the horizon, signaling the end of an era and the beginning of a new one for Chase Bank. Kirby, without a single glance back, knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he had truly won. As Kirby walked out of the bank, a sense of calm settled over him. Despite the chaos that had unfolded, the truth was now out, and with it came a quiet victory. The employees, once skeptical, now understood the weight of the past and the strength of the man before them. Kirby didn't need their acknowledgement. The battle was no longer for their approval. He had reclaimed what was his, not through force, but through the power of truth. And as he disappeared into the fading light, it was clear, the legacy of Chase Bank was forever changed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the once bustling bank stood still, holding the weight of a secret long buried. Kirby's quiet steps echoed in the now silent space, and the employees, who had once dismissed him, stood in awe of the truth he had uncovered. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in decades, the real story of Chase Bank was about to be rewritten. No longer a place built on lies, the bank would now stand as a testament to justice and reclaiming what was stolen. With Kirby's quiet victory echoing through its halls,